Ali, welcome and delighted you could join us today on the NDHA show. And for those folks who don't know, you're the new CEO at West River Health Services in Hettinger, North Dakota. But before we jump into your current role at West River and obviously your career in healthcare, I was hoping you could take us back to the beginning and talk a bit about where you grew up and where you're from originally.
Perfect. Yeah. Well, good morning. It's great to be here. So I grew up in a small town in the panhandle of Oklahoma, and we're actually coined no man's land. So no trees, no hills, not many people either.
North Dakota's perfect for you then.
Yeah, it feels like home. So I grew up there. We had a small hospital there and a few physicians. Being young in that town, similar to Hettinger, you have the ability to be involved in everything at school. So you're in choir. I was not. I actually cannot sing, but we'll veto that one out. Band, and then all the athletics you can think of, and really getting involved with your community within the school system and outside in the community as well. So I was very lucky to have that ability to really grow and create some new skills.
Now, when you say small town, my perception of a small town coming from small town Ireland is like 10 to 15,000 people. Your town that you grew up in Oklahoma, was it much smaller than that, or was it, what size was it?
So we were around 10,000 when I grew up, but we did have a lot of workers that traveled in. We had a large meatpacking plant there, and that's kind of what kept the town alive. For Oklahomans out there, we did have a Sonic. So
Hey, so the shakes there are very, very good.
Yeah.
I will admit that. What's funny, actually, is one thing we were talking about up at the office is I didn't realize you were a rower. Is that something you did growing up, or how do you get into rowing?
Well, so in Oklahoma, especially where I was from, not much water. I actually swam, and I swam from a very early age all the way through high school. And I was set on going to the University of Oklahoma. And they recruit a lot of swimmers to walk onto the rowing team. Okay. So I decided, I'll throw my hat in, and then I realized I was quite a bit shorter than most of the true rowers out there. And a little bit too tall to be a coxswain yelling at them in the front. So it was not a success story.
No, I didn't know that at all. And so when you mentioned that earlier, it was interesting because I don't know many people. It's kind of like pole vaulting. I don't know how you get into pole vaulting when you're younger. So I was curious of how you got into rowing. But one of the reasons why we like to start at the beginning is to kind of get a sense of, where you're from, but some of the individuals in your life who helped influence and shape you growing up. So who growing up for you were some of your role models?
So this is a little cliche, but I would definitely say both of my parents. My dad is really that workhorse backbone of the family, and really taught me some of those skills of working hard. And one of his key phrases is being mentally tough. So just staying consistent and taking things as they come. And my mom was a large part of the community, volunteering, being on community boards, and that was really big to me to see. Now as an adult, what opportunities I have to make an impact on my community. So they were always the people that anybody in the community called for help. They were the first ones to say yes, and everyone knew they could count on them. So that was a big lesson that I learned and like to carry on.
Yeah, I think I would like your dad. I'm a big fan of David Goggins, and he's all about being mentally tough. So if that's your dad's motto for life, I think him and I would get on pretty well.
Yeah.
And so were your parents, you mentioned, I think it was your mum, was sat on some community boards and helped out their local community. Were they in healthcare, or was it this another community board or something different?
It was just other community boards. My parents are actually not in the healthcare field at all. My mom's a teacher, and my dad's in ag business. Okay. So this is kind of a stray from what you would think.
No, and are you the only sibling?
I am an only child. We talked about that earlier, and I thought I'd keep my mouth shut. Yeah, I think that really allowed me as well. I started with some independence really early. We talked about swimming and traveling as well earlier, and I traveled outside of the United States before I was even 18, alone without my family. Yeah. I was going to swim camps across the United States at a young age, and I think that really helped as well with my parents' support, is developing a lot of independence and some more maturity at an earlier age to implement those throughout college and now my early career.
No, that's. I almost want to give you a hug. Sometimes I feel guilty for people who are lonely kids, but it sounds like yours was a pretty good childhood.
It was great, yeah.
All in all. So Oklahoma native. I'm assuming that's where you stayed for college.
I did. I started out at OU like we talked about. I always wanted to go to a big school, but to be quite honest, about 2.5 years into it, I realized I missed the small community. I missed being able to interact with my professors on a personal level. And so I decided, you know what, I'll go back home. There was a college not too far from home. Wrapped up the rest of my bachelor's pretty quickly and was planning on going to medical school. So I took a gap year to study, and I also decided, well, I don't want to look like I'm sitting around. So I went ahead and started my master's in healthcare administration, and I got that from Oklahoma State. So
Okay. For your bachelor's degree, what did you study?
I got a biology degree.
Biology degree, okay. Yeah, I don't think I was intelligent enough for a biology degree. I went the simplest route possible, business administration. I kind of get that out of the way. And if I'm lucky enough, get my master's degree. So that's fantastic. Obviously, Oklahoma Panhandle and then Oklahoma State. What was that experience like of going to some huge colleges here in the U.S.?
What I really took from going to the University of Oklahoma, it was such a cultural meshing pot. There was so much going on. I am very lucky to have grown up with parents who are very open-minded, and so that really helped me succeed there. I was on the student council there at OU, and it was just great to see all the cultural differences, the socioeconomic differences, and how that impacted the college and the surrounding communities. And that's actually really tied into the way I look at healthcare today, having those experiences.
No, that's fantastic. I remember when I first came to the US, I didn't do as much research as I possibly should have. I'm on North Dakota, and I went to the University of Mary here in town, and so University of Mary is a much, I would say, smaller school compared to in Oklahoma. So I'm always curious when people go to them larger schools, what it's like and what their experience is like. But it sounds like you had a fantastic time there. So I'm slightly envious of you going to Oklahoma. And so got your degree, bachelor's in biology, master's in healthcare administration. Did you go into healthcare right away, or what were some of the first jobs that you took after graduation?
So actually, what kind of got me started on the path is when I took this gap year and I was getting my master's, is I started shadowing some physicians and different healthcare careers, and I got to interact hands-on with them. And what I really saw was the struggles that they were having to advocate for their patients. And so the whole time I'm there, I'm just like, oh, well, I feel like it would be so easy to fix this problem. Or why are you having to haggle your administration about this? So that was interesting to me when I got started, and I actually took on a clinic management job at a rural health clinic in Kansas while I was working on my master's. So I got into it pretty quickly, and it's been great.
What were some of your initial experiences on the clinical manager side? Was it what you expected starting in, you're CEO now, obviously the top of the food chain, starting as a clinical manager, and I think you were a CNA as well at one stage. What was those initial experiences like, and have they helped maybe shape some of your ideas now that you have as a CEO?
I definitely think those early days were being able to be a patient advocate and really helping staff filter those through you so you can make those changes. So I started off at a really small clinic. We had 3 advanced practice providers. And so it was working really closely with them as they're covering the ER and covering the clinic and basically upholding the whole system, working closely with them to break down those barriers because they didn't have the time. And so that fell on my shoulders, and I was happy to do it. And so that was really fulfilling. And then when I got to my FQHC in Oklahoma, that was just a whole new ball game, and it really opened up a new perspective on health equity. And so that was new to me, and it was really opened up some more doors looking at politics and policies and state law changes. That's where those big things came into play when we're looking to be able to serve our communities.
I couldn't agree more, and obviously we're in our current session this year, and there's a few things that are impacting healthcare, so I'm sure you're keeping a close eye on that as well. So had a few jobs previous to coming, or a few roles, I should say, previously coming to Hettinger, but you arrived at West River in 2022. What was that translation like for you, and then obviously you have a family as well. So what was that translation like moving to Midwest North Dakota?
So aside from the weather, the snow is a bit unexpected and a little bit out of my realm. But initially when I took my first interview, my husband and my kiddos came along, and that was the first thing we saw was, wow, there's kids outside running around. There's families walking their dogs with their kids. There's just so many people out and about, and that was just a key thing to see. I remember growing up in a small town, it's like, oh, everybody knows my business. But now as a parent, that's something you cherish, on having a community to look out for your children. And so that was really a big selling point for us, knowing that everybody's community minded and cares for each other.
Now, had you ever been to North Dakota previous to being in Hettinger, or even visited the state, or was this your first time in North Dakota?
I think the farthest we had been was Nebraska. And when I started looking, I was talking to a few CEOs that I keep in touch with, and one said, my first CEO job was in South Dakota. And he said, there are some of the best hospitals you will find in North Dakota and South Dakota. Mm-hmm. And I went home and I told my husband that, and he said, we are not moving to South Dakota. And I laughed and I said, okay. And then about 2 weeks later, I said, so I have an interview. And he said, oh, is it in South Dakota? And I said, no, it's in North Dakota. So, and here we are. We took time to come here and get to know the community, and we love it.
Yes, I may be slightly biased, but from the Dakotas, I would have to agree with your husband. North Dakota is definitely better than South Dakota. And so, no, he's seems like a good guy already without haven't met him. And so, arrived at West River in 2022, and so you're a new CEO in our state. And so, for myself and for our audience, can you possibly describe what your leadership style looks like, and what's the culture that you're looking to add to or continue to build upon at West River?
So I think this is really important for rural health systems, and it's one big thing that I like to bring into play is giving people in your organization the ability to say yes. Mm-hmm. So I think your leadership style, taking a gauge on that, is looking inward and saying, how deep within this organization can people say yes and make decisions? Mm-hmm. I think that's a big key part in being able to create a healthy culture. And I think as well, it's helping develop those people on the front lines and opening up that door for them to be a part of the change and eventually step into management one day if that's something they would like. And so I think we have limited resources, and some of our resources are people. Mm-hmm. So being able to take the time and develop them and invest time in them, I think is so important in solidifying the future for your organizations. When you take the time with those people and you can be open and help them find the route that they'd like to stay within the system.
I think that's fantastic. I'm curious, on that piece of it, is that something you've developed? Your leadership, I should say, is that something you've developed as time has went on, or have you had any mentors that have helped you along the way and maybe said, hey, Ali, here's some things that I've seen work well in my career that you could possibly implement in your career?
Absolutely. So I tie it back to my FQHC days. Sierra Durden was my COO at the time, and she was just phenomenal. I think big things that I've taken from her that I like to implement today are honesty, and I think that helped me so much with her being honest with me and helping direct me, having those hard conversations to get me on the right track. It really put me a step ahead in being able to be where I am today. One big thing that she always pushed is we were actually right next to an Air Force base is if somebody aligns with our mission and our vision, let's get them in the door. We can teach them any skill they need to know, but if they fall into those two categories, we'll make them into whatever they want to be. We'll set them ahead, and I will happily take a great employee for 6 months, and knowing with the Air Force Base, they leave quite often, but I will happily take somebody that aligns with those two things and wants to work hard, other than trying to have somebody who doesn't align with the mission and vision, because every single decision should be able to reflect right back onto that.
I think that's fantastic. It sounds like you had an amazing mentor, and I think that advice is fantastic. Obviously, in an ideal scenario, everyone that is in your organization buys into the mission, vision. How do you deal with someone who necessarily doesn't buy into the mission and vision? What does that look like, or what does that type of conversation look like?
So I think there definitely has to be that starting conversation all the time. I think when you keep that open channel of communication, the conversations get easier to have if things come up. I think it's true to say that no employee wants to do a bad job. Maybe they don't have the knowledge to know why they're doing the role that they are or how they make an impact. So I think having that conversation with them and working with them on seeing what impact they provide to our patients in the future is really important to have on getting them back on board. But there's also that time where if they are just not happy and they can't fully align with that mission and vision, let's support them to be able to find something that they do work with. I love having fun in the workplace. So having those people who are aligned to the mission and vision, I have days where I recall where we have little 5-minute dance parties in the hall because we got someone's A1C down. And so that's what I like to have, are people who are so committed to our patients that we're excited to be there. We're excited to make a difference. And that's the kind of people you want to have, and they attract more people who align to those same values.
Yeah, I have absolutely no dance moves, so I'm glad we don't do that at NDHA at all. I would be really awkward in the workplace when they're like, Aaron, show me your dance moves. I'm like, stiff as a board.
Yeah.
I think that's amazing. And I don't even know what the correct word to use would be, but I think that's something that I don't hear of often. So when I sit down and talk with other CEOs or other healthcare leaders, the idea of having a dance party, for example, or a 5-minute dance party and making the environment fun, I think that's the way every workplace should be. I don't always hear that. And so it's amazing that you've implemented that down at West River.
Yeah, we have such tough jobs where it's such serious work that we're doing. So when you get the opportunity to have a little dance party or do some high fives, I actually think, don't tell our safety officer this, I raced a housekeeper down the hallway the other day. I did not have heels on, but just things like that, whatever we can implement to make it enjoyable, I think it builds trust and buy-in to your organization, and you really want to keep this safety net around your people. And I think that's the leader's job, is to make them feel safe and secure and that they can depend on you.
I couldn't agree more. One of the tough parts of being a healthcare executive or being a CEO is making good decisions. And so I'm curious, you as a CEO, what does your decision-making process look like, and how do you continually make good decisions for your healthcare organization?
I think really what it boils down to is dropping your ego. And so I think it's important to know that you can surround yourself with people who know more than you, and you're just fine. I think your job is to get the right people at the table, the ones with the most knowledge. I think you have to realize, as a CEO, you're never going to be the best at any part of the organization. I think the goal is to get the right people at the table, have the conversation, and then everybody agree on that and move from there.
Again, fantastic. One thing that, and this is probably a question personally from me, is I've always been interested in how individuals make decisions when they don't have all the data or sufficient information available. And so we encounter that every day in life, whether it's a personal decision you're making or whether it's a business decision you're making. So for you specifically, how do you make decisions when you don't have all the data you need?
I think it's important first to build the idea and to be okay with having a culture built around, I like to call them wild and crazy ideas. Give me a wild and crazy idea. I'll listen to you. Let's hear it out. I think it's important to know that if you're going to have a culture or an organization that is proactive and inventive and doing new things, that you have to realize some things, when you throw it against the wall, it's not going to stick. And so being okay that some ideas fail, I think you have to have that. And then again, bringing those experts from your team to help make those decisions, but then collectively realizing if it doesn't stick, let's go ahead and make the backup plan and let's move on from there. And we're not going to dwell on our losses, but move forward.
I heard you on recently on the KNDC talk show. Shout out to KNDC. They have a
Yeah.
fantastic talk show, and I again listen to their episodes quite a lot. But I heard you mention on one of those episodes that one of your missions in life is to ensure everyone, particularly those living in rural areas, have access to quality healthcare. And so I'm curious, why is ensuring those folks that live in rural areas, why is it important to you that they have access to good quality healthcare?
I think it started from an early age. The local town that I grew up in, the hospital there was not flourishing. They'd had multiple management companies come in and they kept failing them time after time. So I remember I did deliver my first baby still living in Oklahoma, but I had to drive up to Kansas to do that. I had to drive 45 minutes to have my first child, to go to every single appointment. And lucky enough, I had the financial ability to make those drives. But when you think of the equity that people here deserve, it's just so valuable. I think from my FQHC days as well is what's best for the patient. I think that's a big pillar as well, is let's start with that first and then work back. So what's best for a patient, and then let's figure out how to do that. And so I think being able to provide availability and resources for these patients that otherwise would have to drive if they were able, I think that's where it comes into is the people in rural areas are the backbone of the United States, and we have to take care of them.
Yeah, I can't imagine how stressful that drive was for you, but also your husband. So when we had I have a young son, 9 months old, and my drive from the house down to our local hospital here, where he was delivered, was 6 minutes, and it felt like the longest 6 minutes of my life of getting there. So having to travel 45 minutes just to deliver your child, I couldn't agree more. It's pretty unreasonable. And so having access to care, particularly for those individuals who live in the rural areas, I couldn't agree more, is imperative. Speaking of West River, you guys have quite a few programs that you run through your hospital that I think improves the quality of care that you're offering. And so a few of those is one, you have a partnership with UND. You also have a really cool one with BSC here locally in Bismarck. So could you give us a bit more information on those two programs and what they do?
Sure. So we have the UND Family Medicine Residency Program. So we get a few residents to join us, and it is great being able to utilize them and get them to see our rural communities and be able to practice in these environments. I think you don't know what rural medicine is until you're there. I think you have to be a part of it to really have that buy-in, and you realize how big of an impact you can make. And so whether we are able to shape these future physicians to stay here at West River or take apart a place in rural North Dakota as well, I think that's just so much value, not only for them, but for our state as well. We have our BSc nursing program, so I think that ties back to, great, you're a staff member here. Do you want to be an LPN? Do you want to be an RN? How can we help you? Let's provide that to you. Let's get you started and developing you and all of your professional goals. So we do have our LPN program right now, working towards getting that RN as well, just so we can further educate the staff that we have or draw in new. So important. I think another one, as we talk about access to care, is we have visiting nurse services.
Okay.
So it's a bit like home health, but it is through our clinics. And so we have nurses that'll travel. We have a really wide radius. We have Bowman, Slope, Hettinger, Adams County, and all the way down into South Dakota. And so these nurses are traveling to all of our patients most of them are out in the country, and helping them throughout the weeks and days and getting them settled and just providing and making sure they have that consistent care.
Again, I think it's fantastic. And when I discovered that, I thought that was a fantastic approach, to help out with the workforce shortage that we're all experiencing. And it sounds like that program and possible solution that you've implemented is going to pay dividends in the future. I'm curious if I was, and I wish I was a student again, and I was looking at, okay, I'm from Hettinger, I'm from a surrounding area, and I was interested in getting my LPN. What would I need to do to take advantage of the programs that you offer, and what would that look like for any possible staff member or student living in your area?
Right. So with the LPN program, they do have some prerequisite courses that you take at BSC, which I think majority of them are online, if not all. So honestly, as a member of the community, I'd invite you to come join us as a CNA. And begin taking those classes online, and then as well that'll help you transition. The program's around 2 to 3 days a week, and then so being able to study and do your coursework in the hospital, and then you transition and do your clinicals in the hospital as well. And I think it's so nice to be able to provide them being able to work as a CNA and then doing their LPN program and then coming back on the floor. I think there's a lot of value in being able to see the progression or the role of nursing staff from beginning to end and have that buy-in and then support for the future generations.
I know each year, or I believe it's every 3 year, you guys also do a community needs assessment. Have you guys did that this year, or is that something you're going to be doing at some stage?
So our last one's from 2021, so we are working with UND this year to do our next one. Some of the things that really stuck out community-wise for this one in 2021 was attracting and retaining young families. So that's a big ticket item. That's the unique thing about rural health systems in these smaller communities is we are usually the largest employer. And so it's really just much more than healthcare. It's having that community buy-in and being a part of the community. And so that's a big ticket item. Along with our behavioral health services, we have some great behavioral health staff, and they are working their tails off. It's just being able to get more people here to serve more patients.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. Obviously, the hospital there is fantastic. One thing that I always mention every time I talk about Hettinger, and we spoke about it previously, is the Peacock Mercantile. That I go to Hettinger once or twice a year. I discovered that little coffee shop, and it is now one of my favorite stopping points. So if anyone is a young family, or if anyone's listening who's interested in Hettinger, there's plenty of amenities there where you can enjoy a nice coffee and a nice bakery item. So as we come towards the end of the show, Ali, we've one final question for you. And so this question comes from Yasmina, who is on our marketing team and often joins me in studio when we sit down and talk with some of our guests. And so Yasmina's question was, as a female CEO, what advice would you give to other women who aspire to be organizational leaders?
I would say go for it. I think right now we're in a unique time where much of the workforce is multi-generational. As we're seeing with these younger generations, the need for having real conversations and creating relationships and having empathy. These are things that women naturally have. And so they're no longer really pushed out of the workforce, but now you see these on these new leadership talks or podcasts is having empathy and compassion. And it's like, well, we've had that forever. But I think just like any skill, you have to work and learn it. And I think now's our time. It's something we can capture on and being able to improve the leadership and create great jobs for people within the state.
I think that is a fantastic place to end the show today. Ali, thank you so much for coming to Bismarck and doing the show here this morning with us. I think we're all excited to have you come to your state, and I look forward to seeing and hearing about what you do at West River. I think there's great things coming.
Thank you. Yep. So excited. I think there's so many opportunities within the state, and I can't wait to see how those come to fruition.